Oh, nuts. We've totally botched that train robbery. I guess it obviously only leaves us with one plan now. Haul ass to Bolivia, and also delve into a 1960s movie classic on today's edition of That Song from That Movie.
Hello there, you've reached That Song from That Movie, the journey through the very best and the worst of movie-related songs. I'm your host, whose feet is too big for his bed, Dietrich, and with me, unlike everybody else, he's probably going to stop the rain by complaining. It's Alex.
I don't know why, but yes.
It's an ability.
It's an ability I can stop the rain by complaining. I do like to complain.
And it's going to stop that rain.
And it's going to stop that rain.
And also with us, his eyes will soon be turning red, but don't worry, this is a podcast, so you can't see that.
Nice.
It's Ben.
I have been crying. That's a joke, by the way. I've not. Please send your sympathies too.
That is the first time I've realised that eyes are turning red means he's been crying.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's not like he's getting absolutely blazed.
Yeah, well, I was thinking it could be getting high. I mean, it's the 60s. Actually.
In my head, it was like something from like X-Men, and he was angry and his eyes turned red.
Oh yes, Cyclops.
I don't think that happens.
Yeah,
in the
like
film.
Cyclops.
I was thinking more like Summer of Love getting token on a nice one.
Yeah, 420.
Yeah,
I guess it could be in that
420 Blaze and all that.
So if you haven't guessed already, today's episode is Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, as seen in the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yeehaw.
So what happened when that movie came out, Alex?
Good question.
I don't know.
The film came out in September 1969. So to keep it, well, I'm going to give a broader context of the history of this month, because there was two quite large political stories. One, of course, being the Vietnam War, but I don't think we're going to go too far into that. Although,
please do.
Please do. It might provide some, I don't know, some context for when the film was released and what was going on in America at the time. But it was an important month in terms of the Vietnam War because it was the month that Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Prime Minister, died.
Oh, really?
So, make of that what you will.
R.I.P.
But also in the
he
month
had a
of
large
September,
influence on this film.
Yeah, yes, a very large. Well, you know, maybe it does, but if you can read into it. Also happening this month was 2 more people were killed by the Zodiac Killer.
Oh, really? Is that still going on at this time?
It was, yeah. I
Oh,
think
wow,
this film was out. Was there a film called Zodiac?
Yeah,
about this?
2004 or something. It's got Jake Gyllenhaal and
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr. David Fincher film.
Isn't the film it's really boring, the film, isn't it? But isn't it on
It's
purpose?
not that. I think it is a
Intentionally
good film. It's just, it's long. It's very long. And
Yeah.
spoilers, they don't catch him.
They don't. Well, there you go. There's some sort of political history. But let's go into the more light-hearted stuff.
I was surprised that Jake Gyllenhaal was around in the late 60s.
Yeah. Well, he's just that good. He's wearing a lot of face cream.
And it's his fault we didn't catch him.
So I'm gonna, it's the 60s, the late 60s, which is kind of pinnacle time for the Beatles. There's some big Beatles news in September 1969.
I'm worried.
First of all, John Lennon declined, or he gave back his OBE because of England's involvement in the Vietnam War to link back to the beginning. Yeah.
Traitor.
I think it was also to do. They were. It was something to do with another country as well, possibly in India. I can't quite remember. He wasn't happy about it, so he gave back his OBE. It was also the month that Abbey Road was released.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The real reason why he gave back his OBE.
To create some sort of buzz in the media.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it was also the beginning of the end of the Beatles. So when they recorded Abbey Road, famously, that was sort of where they did most of it individually, and it was the second to last album. The last album being Let It Be, which came out the following year. So I think it was more or less that month when they sort of decided to split up. It's a big news.
Wow.
Big news there.
Yeah.
There was some famous movie-related births in 1969, September.
Hit us with it.
So Catherine Zeta-Jones.
I've heard of her.
Legend.
Yeah.
Rob Brydon's schoolmate.
Also, very relevant for this year, Boon Joon-ho.
Oh, yeah.
That,
Director of Parasite.
Very topical.
Was also born in that year. Along with, to keep it relevant to Leeds, as we're a Leeds-based podcast, Gary Speed was also born in September 1969.
Legend.
Film legend.
And also, musical-based, Sean the Clown Crayon, is it? From Slipknot?
Oh, right. I was like, who's Sean the Clown?
Sean Clown
Yeah,
Crayon.
don't you know Sean the Clown?
That's his name. He was also born in that month. So those people all share the same month of birth. And finally, there were 2 big TV launches in September of 1969.
Gone.
The Brady Bunch.
I've heard of that.
More bigger for the American audiences.
Bigger for the American audience, but still quite important culturally. And Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?
Is that it? Really started in '69?
Really?
1969 was the first season of Scooby-Doo.
In my head, Scooby-Doo started a lot earlier than that.
Yeah, but I thought it must have been like I always thought it was '60s, but I thought it might be early '60s.
Well, is that the Hanna-Barbera? Was it one of their first? Or was Flintstones and that sort of going long? I think before?
Top Cat was probably before, maybe. Flintstones, but it was certainly one of the first, and they brought it in on a Saturday because people were complaining too much about cartoon violence, and they thought that this was a nice cartoon for children about murderers, or well, maybe not murderers,
and how all adults will
ghosts.
betray you.
Cartoon for murderers. The power of friendship.
So there you go. There's the news. Oh no, actually there was one more thing as well.
Clumber, gone.
The first African American superhero, Falcon, appeared for the first time.
As in, like in the
Captain
comic.
America, yeah, in the comic.
Oh, right, that's cool.
Well, that's what the internet tells me. Don't quote me on that, but that's what it said. So yeah,
that was quite a heavy one compared to usual.
Yeah, 1969.
It was a heavy time.
It's a very, very important time.
Unlike to 2020, which is nice and peaceful.
Yeah, obviously.
Oh yeah, nothing to worry about.
Nothing going on. Nothing of importance. So, shall we do a little bit of synopsis of the film?
Yeah, please.
And talk about the song. So the film, Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, came out in September 1969, as discussed. It was based loosely on the life of Wild West outlaws Robert Leroy Parker, who's Butch Cassidy, and Harry Longabow, which I think is how it's pronounced, who's the Sundance Kid. The film follows them as they're on the run from the law following a string of train robberies.
So the names Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, are they linked to the real life people?
Yes, those were their real nicknames.
Right,
I think
okay.
it's so Sundance Kid. I think it said.
I suppose I should just say that I've not seen this film.
Yeah, well, we're going to go into that, but yeah. So Sundance Kid. I think the name came from he was arrested in the town of Sundance, I think, which is in Wyoming.
Okay.
From memory, Butch Cassidy. I can't remember exactly what that. I think it was something to do with him being a butcher before he, as in like an actual butcher of meat, not like a butcher of people.
Yeah, it sounds like a serial killer nickname, doesn't it?
The Butcher. Yeah. So that's where I think the names came from. And yeah, the film follows them as they're on the run from like a posse of like... It's like a posse that's put together who are like the ultimate bad guy catchers, if I remember rightly. Ben, you could probably...
The Dark Avengers.
Clarify that. Yeah. But they... And I think one of the people in the group is like a Native American tracker, and he's like the one that they're always like...
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. He's definitely going to catch us. But yeah, so that's the premise of the film. So yeah... D, not seen the film. Ben, saw the film recently?
I rewatched half of it last night, but I think I saw the full thing like 2 or 3 years ago, as well as seeing it probably. I've seen it maybe 3 or 4 times now.
Was watching only half of it last night an indicative?
No, it was because I started it at about 10:30.
Okay.
So that was the main reason.
What's your general opinions about the film, Ben? Do you like it?
Yeah, I think it's a really good film. I knew... My granddad was a big fan, and I think that got me into it. And I think it's the Paul Newman, Robert Redford combination. Like, I think it was just like the Americans fell in love with it. I know it wasn't as popular when it first came out. I believe that's what someone told me anyway. But yeah, and like they were in The Sting, I think, a few days later.
Yeah, which also won Best Picture.
Yeah,
classic.
And I think just those two together are just absolutely fantastic. I don't think this, the plot's not exactly, I wouldn't say it's gripping. And there's a lot of detail. It's just, like you say, it's 2 guys on the run, just trying to figure out, do we keep going with this life, or do we try and make it clean?
Yeah. Before we talk about the song and its sort of connection to the film, what do you think about the fact that it's a Western film? It has all the iconography of the genre, but it doesn't really have the same feel. Like, I know in the same year, True Grit came out, which is obviously a John Wayne film and one of his most famous. And it's like more of a classic Western. Like, you have that sort of... Yeah, so I mean, what do you think about the choice to make this? It's kind of a genre film, but it's not at the same time.
I think a lot of actors back then were genre actors. So like John Wayne is the Western man, So I think were of a certain type, like all of his films. And I don't think. I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of Robert Redford and Paul Newman westerns like jumping to my mind.
No, it's not what they're known for, is it? Definitely.
No, and I think in that late sort of 60s, the western was like, I know True Grit is you said it's the same year, but I think the Western had started to seep out a bit and sort of to become a lot less ingrained in that classic tropes of the Western. Like, I think the Wild Bunch was probably a similar time, and I think a lot more violence was coming out in it. So there's a lot of shootouts in this film. I think it was a bit more on the action-heavy side, and rather than the sort of the slow, meandering, two guys stood opposite each other for 10 minutes trying to outstare each other, that sort of thing.
I think this sort of time seems to be, doesn't it, the end of the Western era up until maybe the 90s, when you get things like callbacks like Unforgiven and stuff like that.
Yes, and later on I think just remakes like 3:10 to Yuma, True Grit was remade, things like this. Of the typical American Westerns, not the spaghetti Westerns, I think the 60s just represents a different time. I don't know when Magnificent Seven came out as well, maybe that was in the 60s. But I think they're just very action-heavy Westerns rather than the just slow, meandering films of the time. Cool. Like, you compare it to The Searchers from like the 30s, it's very slow. It's a lot more just sort of living out in the Wild West, the adventure, like you said, the sweeping landscapes. Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid isn't really about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I haven't seen the film, but I watched some clips on YouTube, and it reminded me very much of Bonnie and Clyde. I don't know how much of that is to do with it being people on the run.
It's interesting you mention that, because the ending is kind of based off Bonnie and Clyde. Not to go too far into what happens, but if you know the end of Bonnie and Clyde, it's kind of a similar ending, and I think it was intended to be sort of like a replica of that scene.
Okay.
So yes.
Which one came first?
Bonnie and Clyde.
Bonnie and Clyde came first?
I think so, yeah. I think Bonnie and Clyde was like maybe 2 years before. 67.
Yes, 67 does sound right.
So just before, so it's kind of, but obviously the production of this film probably was just after, so they'd probably just seen Bonnie and Clyde and be like, ooh.
That'll work.
I think there's also the escapism element of like the film, with like them going to South America, just trying to get away. Like I think there's a lot of films of that type where it's like the Wild West life, it's catching up on people. It's not like you can just kind of live this life and die it out. It's like people are getting better at catching these kind of, lone outlaws and gunmen, and the only way to sort of live and continue is to try and escape and go to somewhere different. Because I think, do they try and go to Bolivia? I think it is.
Yeah, it's Bolivia.
So yeah, I think it's that thing of like it's almost an adventure film, because they're just going, they're going out.
In my notes, I wrote down the plot as "Escape to Bolivia."
Escape to Bolivia.
Yeah. It would have been a good name.
I mean, it does kind of. I mean, they still get forward into Bolivia. I think the fact that it's set in the 60s is obviously, well, not set in the 60s, sorry, it was made in the 60s, really lends itself to the direction of the film. I think it's a lot more rebellious, a lot more radical. It's kind of, it's very subversive as well, which I think is something we'll get in with the song and the scene in particular where the song features. But it's about these two guys that are sort of fighting against the grain, or against like what's expected of people. And they're the heroes as well, which maybe you didn't always get before then. So the law break, I mean, you got it in the 30s, but then obviously when things like the Hays Code came in, it was more like you had to be on the side of the police.
Yes. Oh yeah, definitely.
So I think, it's sort of like, it's with Bonnie. I think Bonnie and Clyde was definitely the beginning of the going back the other way.
Yeah,
but
especially how it ends.
Yeah, especially well, yeah. We'll move on to the song though, because I don't want to talk too much about the film because it'll ruin it for later. So the song was written by. Do you guys know who it was written by?
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Burt Bacharach.
Exactly, Mr.
Oh,
Burt
right,
Bacharach.
yeah, of course it's Burt Bacharach. I was thinking of the guy who sang it.
And Hal David, so they were very legendary writing duo. 3 of the songs that they wrote together before this one got nominated for Best Original Song at the Oscars. Wow. I'm going to tell you the name of the song, see if you can guess the films.
Okay, go on.
So there's The Look of Love, which is by Dusty Springfield.
Oh, no.
Archie, or it's called, with Michael Caine.
Well,
Alfie.
Alfie, yeah.
Well, so Alfie was actually one of the other ones.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Really?
So Burt Bacharach, which is why in the deleted scenes of Austin Powers 3, they do a version of Alfie, Austin, but he didn't make the film, but obviously that was a callback to the first 2 where Burt Bacharach does appear, as you've just referenced.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Alfie was one of them. Look of Love was from the original Casino Royale.
All right.
God.
Yeah, which is obviously the spoof of the Bond film. And then the third one was What's New Pussycat by Tom Jones.
What film would that be from?
What's New Pussycat?
If you don't know it, you don't know it.
No, and the Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, I don't know.
No, the film was
Octopussy?
No, it's called What's New Pussycat, the film.
Oh, really? Gosh, no, that's a trick question.
Yes, the 2 of them had the same name.
I've never even heard of it.
And I think they wrote quite a few more. I think Burt Bacharach did win more Oscars possibly, but not as a writing duo with Hal David. So there you go. Singer was B.J. Thomas then.
Yeah.
And he recorded the song 7 times. recorded it 7 times because the first 6 Burt Bacharach wasn't happy with, and the 7th time, which is the version used in the film, he had laryngitis.
Wow.
So, which is why maybe it has a deeper, richer sound. I don't know. That's maybe why they went for that version.
I don't know if you know this. As in 7 goes in a row, like his voice was going.
I think
yeah, just towards the end.
Actually, I don't know.
Raindrops Keep.
It just said recorded it 7 times. I think it was probably not on the same occasion.
Right. Okay.
I think it was maybe they tried it once, synced it together with the music, didn't like it, tried it again, like that kind of thing. As well, BJ Thomas. So we'll get into it now in terms of the song related to the film. Robert Redford famously did not like the scene.
Oh, really?
Well, he did not like the song in the scene together. And as well, BJ Thomas, his agents regretted him doing the song and thought it would ruin his career.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Well, I mean, I don't know this. Who's the director of the film? Is it anyone famous?
I don't know, Ben.
I just don't know if if he had sort of pulling power, because I think in the 60s there was a lot more sort of director power as earlier, whereas it was just very big studios making films. I don't know if people often had regrets when it wasn't these sort of big bankable, I know this is going to work out.
I know the Fox board weren't happy. Well, they were worried about it. I think the song, weirdly, it doesn't seem very subversive or new, avant-garde now. But I think at the time, it maybe was more so, and I think BJ Thomas said that in an interview, and it didn't get a lot of radio play. So I think it was kind of a risky decision, and obviously as well, in terms of the film, it's very anachronistic to the actual genre. It doesn't suit a western, so it's a very pointed choice to put this kind of song in there. Which I think, if we go into the scene now. What did you guys make of the scene? You've watched the scene on its own, Ben. You've seen the full film, so you've seen the scene in context of the film.
Yes.
Yeah, so I've not seen it in context of the film, and if I was shown this clip on its own and was told it was from a film like Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, I wouldn't believe you. It doesn't seem to fit what in my head that film is.
Yeah,
it's very strange.
We should probably actually describe what the scene is for people who haven't seen it.
So
it's so Butch Cassidy is played by Paul Newman, and he is riding around on a bicycle with the character Etta, who's played by Catherine Ross, who's actually the Sundance Kid's girlfriend, which again adds to the strangeness of the scene.
I was rereading that earlier, and I was just like, wait, have they got that wrong? And I always forget it's the other way. Well, you'd expect it to be the other way.
Yeah, and I think it's this scene. It's intentionally subversive, I think. They've sort of put it there to be like, this film isn't like a normal film in the genre. We're going to be defiant. We're going to make choices that aren't normally associated with this kind of film. And I think that this scene generally, the fact that he's on a bike, not a horse, for instance, obviously is quite significant.
Yep.
It's the two characters who aren't romantically involved having sort of like a romantic comedic scene together. The song itself is about staying calm, staying happy when it's raining, which in itself is sort of like something that you wouldn't necessarily normally do. You wouldn't be, and as well, the song is about rain, and it's sunny. It's in the middle of south of America.
It looks very dry.
Yeah, very dry. It's the scene's placement in the film itself, Ben, which you could probably attest to, having watched it recently, is weird in itself. It just sort of comes out of nowhere.
Very. It doesn't fit, and especially even within that, there's another level within the song, which you're probably gonna say it has a breakdown.
Yes, the sort of vaudevillian circus thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, which isn't in the original song, but they sort of added in there.
No.
Which again just sort of really stands out, and it just makes the scene more memorable, really, doesn't it? And possibly why people have remembered it so vividly.
For Paul Newman's abilities to ride a bicycle in various ways.
Now, I only watched that scene once, and I was pretty certain that was not the same actor doing the stunts on the bike.
Some bits are close up though. You can see. I don't know if there was a stunt double in any of the other scenes.
I've actually done the research on this after speaking about it.
Oh, go.
So he did all the stunts, bar the one where he goes backwards through the fence.
That makes sense.
The one where he goes backwards he didn't do, but every other one he did. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I think Robert Redford, actually, in the film, just as a side point, did most of his own stunts as well. I don't think Paul Newman did all of his stunts, like the things on the train and stuff, but in terms of the bike scene, did do all of it.
I know Robert Redford, Paul Newman, was already a household name by then. I think Cool Hand Luke was, 2, 3? Yeah, he's 67, Cool Hand Luke. So he was I think he's already a major hustler as well at the start of his career. That was a big film. So I think Paul Newman was already a draw, and I'm pretty sure Robert Redford, that was his big break. So I imagine there's a lot less we can't let our major star do these things. So I imagine 10 years later, probably maybe Robert Redford wouldn't have been able to do those stunts.
Yeah. If we look at the scene, why do you think they decided to have the scene in the film, and why do you think it feels so weird, both of you? I know you've not seen it in the context of the film, but why do you think it seems weird. Like you said before, like it doesn't feel like this would be a scene that would be in that film. But do you think that's just because it's not of that genre, or?
Yeah, everything I knew about this film before we started, like since before someone wrote down we're doing Butch Cassidy and pinned it on the wall. In my head, it was essentially Butch Cassidy is like a more Western version of Bonnie and Clyde. So I had it down as a super serious, nobody has any time for jokes type thing. And then this song and this scene seems to be from almost like a rom-com. It's a completely different feel to what I imagine the rest of the film is.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say the rest of the film isn't serious necessarily, and it is quite jokey, isn't it? Like there's that part where he's having a fight with the guy who's taken over his gang and like kicks him in the crotch rather than like shooting him. It's kind of, it has a lot of that in there, but I think this scene like ramps up to another level.
I think as well, just as a narrative piece, it is ensuring, because they are, in reality they were villains. I think it's just ensuring that they are seen to be likable. It's like it's a reliable sort of, yes, he can be a joke, he's a joker, he's a laugh, he's got a nice side. I think it just cements them as like the hero of the piece.
Yeah, and I think as well on that, it really cements his character, doesn't it? Because he's like the one who's a bit of like almost like a ladies' man. He's the one who's like the cheeky one, whereas like Robert Redford is like more of a serious gunslinger, if I remember rightly. So yeah, maybe it's just like it's more character development for him, but it is just, I think it is odd that it's him and Catherine Ross's character rather than Sundance. But although it makes more sense as his character, but it's just a strange scene, isn't it, to have those two together?
Yes.
Yeah. Very just weird scene.
Yeah, but I think it's a testament as well to Paul Newman, who he just has that charisma that it doesn't seem weird, or like, especially with the vaudeville music on, you could not imagine John Wayne doing that. You can imagine John Wayne doing a lot of the other things, but imagine John Wayne riding a bicycle to like circus music. I think
what a vision.
Humorous he ever was probably like in The Quiet Man and things like this. But yeah, Paul Newman is just he just exudes charisma.
Yes, yeah, and I think this scene's almost like designed to help to bring out even more, isn't it? But as well, like I guess there could be something in the scene where, because it's him and her who are not in a conventional relationship, maybe it's linked to this whole like summer of love a couple of years before, a lot more freedom sexually, sexual liberation. It's a bit more of a like a wink to camera, like maybe things that don't have to be as defined as they were before. So Ben, you mentioned earlier that perhaps the film, when it was very originally released, so the first few months and things, it wasn't that successful. But I think we can agree that kind of, especially the scene itself, has sort of resonated, along with the song, a lot further than that. And I think the song did actually win the best song. So why do we think the film, the song, the scene, or a combination of two or three of those things have sort of resonated? And as well, like, why do we think it's lent themselves to parody so often? I know there's a scene in Spider-Man 2 specifically, and there's a scene in The Simpsons, for instance, that directly references this. So yeah, what do you guys think?
Well, I mean, the scene itself is sort of out of the context of the rest of the film. Maybe that has it made the audience go, wow, this will stick in my brain. So which lends itself to parody, because everyone needs to know what you are spoofing for a parody to land. So you go for something that is going to stick in everybody's mind. Yeah,
that's a good point. And as well, the song along with it, the two things go hand in hand. You think of the song, you remember the scene. You think of the scene, someone riding a bike. You almost think of the song. Like in The Simpsons, the only reference is the fact, I think, that they're riding a bike. I don't remember there being any other hint to the fact that it's from that scene. They're riding a bike and they're singing the song, which is just, that's the only connection, and yet we know what it's about. Or if you haven't seen the film and then you watch it, you instantly like, that's where all those references are.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly the case for me. I didn't realise it was a reference. I thought it was like a nice moment on The Simpsons, much like Why Do Birds Suddenly Appear? I thought it was just something like that, where it was just a nice moment the writers had created. No, I was wrong. I've been living a lie.
Well, yeah, I think on the poster of the time as well, there's a still image of them on the bike. So it was obviously...
Oh, is there?
Yeah. So there's a poster. I mean, I imagine there might have been quite a few posters from the time, but the original theatrical release poster has the picture of them on the bike, like a sort of a sketch black and white drawing. So
which is really interesting, isn't
it? Alongside the also iconic like final scene, like final still, which kind of as the credits roll.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's just like a really pointed effort on their part, or the marketing team that were doing promotion for the film, that they're sort of really trying to like, this is a western, but it's a different type of western where the the cowboys ride bicycles instead of horses. What about the scene in Spider-Man? Do we remember the scene? Spider-Man 2?
I don't.
It's when his powers have gone out, or he's given up on his powers or something, isn't it?
The part I really remember is he sort of like watches like a police car drive past and then takes a massive bite out of a hot dog. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a shit-eating grin on his face.
Yeah, it's a really, really cheesy sort of montage in the middle, similar to the one in Spider-Man 3 where he does the dance. But it's kind of like, I guess it's the prelude to that one.
Well, there was a parody in my head. Well, I didn't know it was a parody at the time. That I was convinced was in Naked Gun. And I spent ages looking for it. There's going to be a few weird like Google searches of when someone looks at my laptop and I've got like Raindrops Keep Falling on my head naked and stuff like that. Eventually, I figured it out. It was Leslie Nielsen and it was a parody. But it was in the film Spy Hard from 1996.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it was not a good film.
Not
at all. But also, in my head, I was just like, I have seen Leslie Nielsen in old-timey tweed with a girl, it's like she's from like in a Victorian dress, doing stunts on a bike and then falling off a cliff to this song.
Yeah.
And it existed and it made me feel better about myself.
Yeah. Well, that's always nice, isn't it?
It was weird, like I was just looking, some of the reviews at the time were quite heavily critical of that scene as well. So I wonder if it has been a sort of, in looking back, looking at the films of the decade, the changes of like censorship and being more like mainstream violence in a way. Things changing and like the sort of the new generation coming through and being a lot more sort of the first film goer generation, and being a lot more open to new things, and maybe critics of the time being a lot more used to the classic Western and expecting something and it not being that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely it. And I think it's always easier to look back in hindsight at the film in context.
Yes.
I suppose it's less easy for them to notice the sort of like the avant-garde way that the film sort of separates itself from the genre. At the time, maybe it's always like, oh, well, they've done that wrong, rather than they've done something new and fresh. Which I think is what the film is all about, really, isn't it? It's all about being defiant, being subversive, being something different, which just is kind of what, if you look back at the 60s with rose-tinted glasses and ignore like what we mentioned earlier about Vietnam War and stuff like that, that's kind of how people see that sort of late 60s period, don't they? With like Woodstock and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, maybe that's what they're trying to get at.
It's that sort of, do we look back on what we know and what we're used to, as in the Western of, old, or do we look for something new? Do we change direction? Do we try a hand at something different? And I guess that's what the characters are mulling over for most of it. They, I guess, end up going down we only have one way to go. But I think you're right, what is going on at the time matches quite well to what's actually going on in the narrative.
So, it's been established on this podcast, I haven't seen this film. Do you think this film still has cultural... Well, not even just the film, but the scene have cultural significance in 2020, in the present day? I would go on a limb and say no. The silence I'm going to take
I thought Alex
no.
was going to answer, but...
Cogitating. I think that... I only saw it for the first time a few years ago. And I thought at first when I watched it, I wasn't really sure what it was supposed to be. I think it was difficult to sort of understand why it was so different from the genre, but I think it's because you think it's 60s, it's a Western, like you did, like you'd think this has everything visually what I expected.
Yeah.
But in terms of the script, in terms of like the characters, it's very different. So it instantly sort of like tickles the back of your brain in a way, like it's like, oh, this doesn't quite feel right. But then I think when you review it at the end and you review it in the context of it was the late 60s and what everything that was going on, I think it makes the film make a lot more sense, and I think it does resonate. I think it's always interesting when you watch a film when it's almost like a collage. It's kind of like a surrealist collage. This film, there's so much like being thrown at it from different types of things, and different genres, different ideas. That it's always interesting to watch it. And I think if you watched it a second time, third time, you'll find something new every time. So yeah, I think so.
Oh, and what about you, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, not much more to add. I think I enjoy it as a fan of the time as well. Just those two are icons of that era, basically. Paul Newman, Robert Redford are just... The bromance is infectious. Those two bounce off each other like... they are as close as Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were, and I think it's just very believable. I think some parts of the dialogue's a bit naff. But otherwise, yeah, I think I find it an enjoyable film, and probably a lot more enjoyable than a lot of Westerns. And I think that's probably just because I'm a bigger fan of the stuff that came out of that decade than some of the earlier westerns that were more of type. And yeah, I mean, for me, it's definitely stood the test of time.
I think as well, like, we spoke about the subversive nature of the film and things, but I think ultimately it's a film about friendship, isn't it?
Yeah.
And like, films about friendship, which it sounds cheesy and corny, but that's kind of what it's about. I think films like that always resonate and always will do, because that's, that's one of it's a nice thing.
Yeah, it's one of the iconic, like, if you think of like bromance films, that is probably one of the most, well, I'd say, to me, it'd probably come up with as one of the most iconic.
Yeah.
Nothing else jumps to my head.
Yeah, and the overall message as well, like, that's reflected in the song. Like, things are gonna try and get you down, things are gonna try and get in your way, but if you've got friends, if you've got love, you can always overcome those things. And yeah, I think it's a nice message for the overall message of the film, and it's just a fun film.
It is a very fun film. Yeah, you should watch it, Dietrich.
Yeah, slowly being like convinced that I need to give this film a go. After watching that scene on its own, I still wasn't really convinced. If anything, I was more unlikely to watch it. But now, you've really sold it on me. So I guess that brings us to the ultimate question. Da-da-da. We need a jingle for this bit.
Yeah. Beep, 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 beep.
We can't use that for everything, Ben.
We could use the music from the end of the song.
I think we should give it out to the listener. You need to create something for us, and we will maybe credit you with it. Maybe. Do you know what it should be? It should be the music from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Yeah. So, the ultimate question. Movie or song?
In the background. Alex, you go first.
Ooh, it's a difficult one, this.
Yes.
I think actually I might go song.
Song?
Yeah, because I feel like the song, although I like the film a lot and I think it is fun, and it represents a lot of what was good about cinema at the time, that they were trying to do different things with genre films and trying to experiment. I think the song embodies everything that the film wants to represent, and I would gladly listen to the song. I don't know necessarily whether I would always gladly watch the film. So for that reason, I'll say song.
Okay, 1-0 song. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, I was, before Alex started speaking, I was going to say film, but just thinking then, like, other than if I wasn't just sat here intending to talk about the film, because that's what we're doing, it doesn't pop up into my mind a lot. Whereas I feel like it's a kind of, you hear it a lot on TV. It's kind of a tune that you just sometimes start humming, I feel. And so I probably say it plays a larger part in day-to-day life, the song, over the movie.
And as well, the song will always remind you of the film, doesn't it?
Yeah, always.
So
I
think for that reason, almost the song does the job. It does the job that what rewatching the film would do, I suppose, depending on how many times.
I'll probably go on. I'll go song. There you go, Burt Bacharach.
Okay, so that's song 2-0. Obviously, I haven't seen the film, so yeah, I'll go song as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, 3-0 song. I think we're all in agreement.
Clean sweep.
The song to me is better than the film, and it always will be. I'm probably not going to watch it.
Great.
Put one on the board for Burt Bacharach.
Yeah.
And Hal David, of course. We can't forget his contribution.
We will.
Well, most people seem to.
Who?
Okay, so that brings us nicely to the end of today's show, after a resounding victory for the song over the movie. Thank you for listening today on that song from that movie. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we are TSFTMPod, which I'm getting more and more natural at saying. So my name's Dietrich, and I've been joined today by Alex.
Nothing's worrying me.
Very good, very nice. And also, it's goodbye from Ben.
Try Paul Newman salad dressing.
Excuse me?
Paul Newman salad dressing! You ever have it? It's great.
What are you talking about?
Paul Newman's at Newman's Own.
Do we need to launch a new podcast?
What's it called? Is it
That's sauce from that movie.
Have you never had this in your... I grew up with this salad dressing in my cupboard.
Wait, and it's called Paul Newman's Own?
And it's the Paul Newman.
Yes, Paul Newman's own salad dressing. It's got a picture of his face on it.
Yeah, but did he make it?
Yes, he made it. He made it.
Was it like George Foreman Grills?
Yeah, the George Foreman.
Yeah, well, listeners, look up Newman's.
Why would you bring this up in the outro?
Yeah, I feel like Ben.
Goodbye, listeners.
Yeah, they should... yeah, we'll see you down the road. Bye. Bye.
Goodbye, listeners.
What was that?
I can't believe you've never heard of Newman's own salad dressing.
That was a good ending.